Welcome to Monday through Sunday. I'm Logan.
I'm Sanam.
And I'm Lane. We're best friends, the founders of Blossom Brands, and the hosts of this podcast.
We can't wait to take you behind the scenes of running a 7-figure agency with our best friends.
We're sharing our mistakes, our lessons learned, and giving you tactical advice to build the career, the business, and the relationships you dream of, and a life you don't need a weekend to escape from.
So let's get balanced and let's get down to business. Welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Monday through Sunday podcast. My name is Logan Lockhart and I am coming at you soloed with today's episode. As you guys know, Lane is on maternity leave, so Sanam and I are holding down the fort. Her solo episode a couple weeks ago absolutely blew up. You guys loved it. We got such great feedback. I know everybody is buying the Vivian Lillian dress. I personally have my eyes on the Gaston cardigan. So now it's my turn to have you guys to myself and talk to you about a topic that I'm really excited to chat about, and actually a topic that was sent in to us from a listener. Major shout out Chloe for sending in this question. We love to hear from you guys. And as a reminder, please don't be shy. You can always send us a DM at Monday Through Sunday Pod or send us an email to hello@Monday Through Sunday Pod with anything you want to talk about. This podcast, as much as it is ours, it is yours. So we don't want to be just talking to ourselves. We want to be giving you the content that you're craving, that you want to hear more about, that you're interested in discussing. So we can't do that unless we hear from you. So let us know. Okay, so moving on to today's topic. And I'm going to read you the exact submission that we received because I think hearing her words and hearing her struggles and her pros and cons and all the options just really paints a picture of all the nuance of what we want to talk about today, which is all about moving to a new city. What factors go into making that decision? How can you make sure that you're moving for yourself and moving for the right reasons? Uprooting your life is no small feat, so we want to keep you informed with all the information, and I personally feel especially qualified to talk about this topic because I have moved more times than I care to admit. So before we get into that, let's read the question. Chloe writes, "Hi, first things first, I absolutely love your girls' podcast. Thank you so much. All of your advice and tips are real and helpful, especially being a 24-year-old woman trying to figure it all out. Something I would love to hear more on the podcast is about your guys' experience moving to different states. I have grown up in the Chicagoland area, but I want to experience living elsewhere. My parents have a place in Arizona, and a few of my cousins live there too. I really want to try something new and live a healthier lifestyle, but I'm so torn from leaving my home state and my best friends from high school and college. Also, something to consider, my boyfriend would have to move with me since we are talking about getting engaged within the next year or two. Congrats. He's open to the idea, and I'm not sure how to make it our reality. I'm so scared to take the first step. So any advice is much appreciated. XOXO." So again, thank you so much, Chloe, for sending this in. I just loved this question, and it honestly did our job for us planning out these episodes. So again, major thanks. But when I got to thinking about this topic, I wanted to make sure and skip over the obvious about moving, which is the logistics, hiring movers, how do you transfer utilities, which all of those things are really valid and things that I definitely have had to figure out in the past. But what I want to talk about instead is the why behind a big move and the different times in your life where you might be considering those. And so to make this episode as widely applicable as possible, we're going to break it down to 3 key times in your life that someone may be considering moving. And those are moving for college, moving post-grad, and moving as an adult. Now, that's not to say everybody's moving at these times in their life. You'll come to hear I didn't move too far from college, for example. But as I thought about just the bell curve of most people, these are really probably the biggest moves of your life. And I would say the most defining moves, the moves that really set the course or the trajectory or the tone of what the next few years of your life are going to look like. So that's what I want to get into today. And so without further ado, let's talk about it. Time frame number 1, moving for college. This is, for many people, one of the first major moves of your life. You're leaving your parents' house. You're moving in to a freshman dorm. For me, that was my first time ever having roommates. So that was a whole other ball game. And I think there's a lot of pressure at this time in your life. And keep in mind, you're 18, 19 at this time. And this is a huge decision, not only from financial implications, but also just deciding what social circles you're going to run in, what team you're going to support on game day, and what kind of education you're going to have, which is going to launch you into your career. So let me emphasize, deciding where you go to college is a big deal and it's a big decision, but it's a big decision for a reason because I do think it really matters. So to break this down as simple as possible, I think the main deciding factor when people are first thinking about where they want to go to college is, okay, do I want to go far or do I want to stay close? Referencing where they grew up. I personally was somebody who I always wanted to go far away. For those who know me, I am obsessed with romantic comedies. Like, give me anything with Kate Hudson, Jennifer Aniston, Sandra Bullock, I am there. And so in all romantic comedies, I'm thinking Devil Wears Prada. I'm thinking 13 Going on 30. Oh my gosh, Jennifer Garner, I love you. All of those romantic comedies, and especially for the ones that are focused on, the coming of age story of the young woman working hard in her career, there's a common theme. They all exist in New York City. And so from a very young age, I had it in my head that I just had to move to New York. Like I just always had this on my vision board. It was just like, to me, being successful and living in New York City, I equated those two things. So I wanted to be successful. Therefore, I needed to move to New York. I needed to work in fashion. I needed to run down the street on Fifth Avenue in heels going to a really important business meeting. So this is something that I always had in my head. But when it came time to start looking for colleges, I wasn't really loyal to a particular school. So when I started touring, and I'm from the Dallas area. So I'm from Denton, which is actually a college town itself. The University of North Texas is there. It's a small, or I guess not small, but it's a liberal arts school. And so my dad went to college there. And so being from a college town, I was like, okay, I'm just going to branch out my first couple visits. The natural choices, TCU, SMU, are in Fort Worth and Dallas. So it's like, we're going to take an hour drive, go tour those schools, check it out. So I sent out my applications to a bunch of places, but the first places I actually toured were the local schools. And for me, what happened is I had no interest in staying close to home, but as soon as I stepped foot on TCU's campus, I was like, game over. It's done. It was love at first sight, which is something, if you also don't know me very well, I fall in love very hard and very fast. This is true in romantic relationships. This is true with material items. And this was true with where I went to college. The only downfall of TCU was that it was close to home. It was only 45 minutes away. And I had in my head that I was going to move to California, New York, just like somewhere cool that equated success in my brain. And so I remember very clearly, and if you're a 90s kid, you may have similar memories, sitting down in the computer room, what a throwback, with my dad, pulling up this Excel spreadsheet, going through all of my college acceptances, the financial aid, the scholarships I was given at each respective school, and weighing my options from a financial perspective. I knew in my head I wanted to go to TCU, but obviously, with a private school, that comes with a price tag. So I remember sitting in the computer room with my dad, crunching all the numbers. And he was like, if you really want to go to this school, these are the financial implications. It's only a little bit more to go to TCU. So if it's what you really want, I think it's worth it. So I remember the moment he told me I could go to TCU, and I literally cried. I was so happy. But I will say something that I wish I would have considered more seriously at this time, deciding to go to college, aside from the location component, is the financial component. And I know this doesn't apply to everyone. I know there are plenty of people who are lucky enough that, paying for college isn't something that they have to worry about. And for those people, I'm so envious. And that's what I strive to provide for my children someday. So I just really hats off to your parents in that situation. But for those of us who did have to, apply for student loans, I wish I would have taken into account more specifically how that would break down on a tactical level once I graduated. So I'm talking about what's the monthly payment when you graduate? When does that payment kick in? For me, it was 6 months after graduation. So for example, just full disclosure, for the amount of student loans that I took out, my monthly payment as soon as I graduated college was $500 a month. And at the time I was making a $3,000 salary, not my take home pay. So I don't remember what my take home was, but that's a huge chunk of my budget. And it was really a strain for me first starting out in just making my cash flow work. That's something that was hard to figure out. And let me know if you guys want another episode on this, but figuring out, okay, you have to pay your rent on the 1st of the month, but your student loan payment's due on the 15th. If you spent all of your money on groceries and rent, how do you pay your student loans come the 15th? So those were just some things that I had to juggle post-grad that wouldn't have been as challenging had I gone to a less expensive school. And another thing I want to bring up is the impact on your net worth if you're taking out debt at age 18. So for example, if you enter the world and you don't have student loan debt, you're starting off at a baseline 0. Your net worth is, let's call it 0, and it's going to go up from there as you save money and are responsible, etc. But if you're someone who took out student loans, your net worth is starting in the negative, which is just like a bummer and not something I thought about because my first few years out of school, you feel like you're like digging yourself out of this hole. And it's just not as fun as being like, oh, I'm earning money as, oh, I'm making myself less broke. You know what I mean? So that mentality is just something that I really struggled with, that feeling of being in debt as soon as I like entered the world. I was like, oh, this just doesn't feel great. And it makes me not as excited about my paycheck because I know it's already being sucked in all these different directions. Not to mention you're an entry-level employee who are working your butt off, but that's, again, I digress. But that is my advice for anybody choosing where to go for college. Don't underestimate living close to home because I had a great experience. I think choose your school based on your major and that gut feeling. I hope you fall in love with at first sight like I did. It makes the decision a lot easier. And then a second piece of advice is to consider the financial component because I definitely just wish I would have known what I was getting into there. Okay, so moving on to the next major time that most people would consider a big move in their life, which is post-grad. So you've done your 4 years at your university and now you're trying to get a job, which I would say this is just as high pressure. There's just so many people in your life at that point asking you, like it goes from where are you going to college, where are you going to college to where are you going to get a job, where are you going to get a job, do you have a job yet, do you have an internship yet? Like all those questions that people just pepper you with, well-intentioned people. Like if you think about it, if people are asking you these questions, it means they care about you. So like we love you, mom, dad, aunt, and uncle, like thank you for caring, but it is a lot of pressure. And so when I think about moving for post-grad, and I also think there's the pressure from friends, like everybody's graduating at the same time. So it's like, oh, I got a job here. I got this signing bonus. I got that paid for a car. And like, let's be real. I didn't get a signing bonus. I don't think that exists in the marketing industry. So something to consider if you want a signing bonus, maybe try consulting. Those are the only friends I knew that got those big fancy signing bonuses. So with that being said, when you think about moving post-grad, obviously the job is the determinant factor. But I would say over time, it's kind of evolved in what's considered the norm. And I would say there's kind of 3 different routes that I see people take. Number 1 is the classic route of you get the job and you move to where that job is located. Number 2 is figuring out where you want to be and finding a job that gets you there. So for example, I always had New York on the mind, so I started applying to jobs in New York. And then route number 3, which this is a little after my time, but once remote work has become more of a thing, it's finding the place you want to live, finding the job you want to have, and doing it remote so you get the best of both worlds. So with those 3 different routes, personally, like I said, started off with route number 2. I wanted to move to New York, so I started applying for every job under the sun as long as it got me to Manhattan. And I had a double major in entrepreneurial management and marketing, and I would say both of those majors, like it's not like biomedical engineering that's super specific. Like they are a little bit open to interpretation. So figuring out what type of job titles to even apply to in the first place was a big hurdle for me. Like they don't tell you that in the Career Center, like what to type on LinkedIn to find the job you're looking for. So for me, I was applying to a mix of like sales jobs, marketing roles, etc. But I did find there was more of an abundance of sales jobs. And personally, my dad was in sales, so I knew what that was like. And I really wanted like a fixed salary for myself when I was first starting out. I was really scared of having a job that ebbed and flowed when you had a good month or a bad month. So for me, a fixed salary was really attractive in choosing a role. But what I found in New York, I was getting a lot more responses from sales jobs. So I actually lined up a couple interviews, flew to New York with my mom. It was like such a pinch me moment. I was like, oh, I'm such a big girl. We sat on the back of the plane and drank wine together on the way to New York. It was awesome. But I lined up 2 interviews, one with a sales job, which they had seemed really interested in me. And I felt like, this is kind of a shoe-in. I think I'm going to get this. And then another was for my dream job. And my dream job was the job that I actually ended up taking, but I did not get accepted in the New York position. I got accepted in the Dallas office. So what I ended up doing was giving up my New York dream in favor of the dream job with the potential to transfer to my dream location later. And I would say that was not my mentality at the time. That all just happened by chance. Like I said, I was New York or nothing. And then the sales job I actually did accept, and then I turned it down. Fun tidbit, all employment in the US is like employment at will. So you can actually sign an offer letter and then say thank you, but no thank you after the fact, which I'm not proud of. And I'm not encouraging that anybody do that. But I truly thought an offer letter was like a binding contract, like the unbreakable vow in Harry Potter, but it's not. So just FYI. And that I think is a good lesson. That's the first time I think in my life that I had to like disappoint people in the best interest of myself. And I think if I had learned that lesson earlier in my career and like really had it sunk in, because I ended up having to do that a lot more times in my career. So again, I digress. Maybe that's the title of this episode is I digress. But anywho, I ended up going with option one. I stayed in Dallas to pursue the dream job in my like medium location. Like it wasn't my dream location, but I was cool with it. And I ultimately never ended up transferring to the New York office. That's a whole other thing we don't need to get into. I misbehaved, fell from grace. It was a whole thing. But I did get to travel there a ton. So my clients were in New York. So I really ended up getting the best of both worlds because I got to travel to New York like once or twice a month on business, i.e. stay in fancy hotels, expense dinners, expense coffees, basically go there for free on my dime in terms of my dime. And I got to live my New York life, but on a Dallas budget, which was a really nice twist for me. So I would say my advice in looking at this whole post-grad time frame, a lot of people tell you that your first job doesn't matter. A lot of people say, your first job, it's just going to suck. You've just got to get your foot in the door. You'll figure out what you want to do once you get there. And I want to just debunk that saying that your first job doesn't matter because I completely disagree. I do think your first job really and truly matters because it sets you up in the industry that you're going to be pursuing. So if you're seeking an entry-level role, in my case, in fashion, in marketing, I came in with the marketing skills. I didn't have the industry fashion skills, but I learned those once I got there. If I up and moved after that and decided that I wanted to work in hospitality, I'm again starting from ground zero. I know nothing about hospitality. And I think that being able to grow your knowledge base by being really specific about what industry you want to be in from the start will put you leaps and bounds ahead of people who jump and leapfrog from industry to industry trying to figure out what they want to do. So my advice is to put your dream location on the back burner, which I don't know if my younger self would have listened to this. So if you're rolling your eyes at me, I understand. But my advice would really, really, really be to prioritize your dream industry so that you can build your knowledge base to become an asset to that industry. And then you can use yourself as an asset, as leverage to get to the location that you want to go to long term. So that's my 2 cents. I do think your first job matters. And I wish somebody would have told me that because I would have saved myself a lot of pointless interviews. Moving right along to moving as an adult. So this is the last time frame that we're going to talk about, and just take the thing that we just talked about, fast forward in your brain like 3 to 5 years. This is really any time after that initial big post-grad move. You're settled, you're in your career, you've maybe gotten promoted a few times, changed companies, what have you. And at this point, you're looking to move for other reasons. And this is really, if you think about it, this is the first time that your move isn't related to your education, isn't related to a job. It's not related to a specific end goal from a tangible perspective. It's more related to an end goal for your happiness. So for example, are you 27 years old and you're craving adventure? Maybe you want to move for adventure. Maybe you want to move to be closer to family. Maybe you met someone and you want to move closer to either of your families because you're going to settle down and have kids and you want free babysitting, which was the case for me. So whatever your reason may be, whether it's adventure or settling down, I think there does come a point later in life where you're looking to make, I don't want to say the final move, but maybe that move that is just for you. It's not for anyone's outside expectations, or it's not for this job that happens to be located in XYZ place. This move is because you feel called to be somewhere. I think it's important in your 20s to experience a lot of different places. I have lived in only a couple cities, but in more apartments than I care to admit. But I will say, finding a city that really feels like home and finding the people to surround yourself with that make it all feel warm and fuzzy, I think is the point of that last phase of moving. And so to bring it back to our original question, this is kind of the phase of life that Chloe is writing to us. She is feeling happy with her friends and family in Chicago, but she is just craving something more. And I love what she mentioned about a lifestyle that better suited her needs. And this is something that I feel I really resonated with because, for example, I had been living in Dallas. I really loved it there, but just Dallas in a city never felt like my home. And like I said, I went to TCU. My boyfriend, who I met after college, completely unrelated, he happens to be from Fort Worth. So I have a personal connection to Fort Worth. He grew up here, has a great group of friends here, and all their wives and girlfriends I love dearly as well. And so we always, as we became a couple, kind of knew we would end up in Fort Worth long term. And so for me, I think just knowing that that was my end game made me just automatically equate Fort Worth to being my future home. And so I just got to a point where I was ready to start living in that life now, and I was ready to plant my roots. And I felt like the more time that was passing that I wasn't here, I was just missing out on being settled sooner. And so one thing that I want to touch on this, which I know I mentioned that I did in this case move for a boy. I do not recommend for any of the girlies listening moving for a boy unless you are damn certain he is the one. And I'm not talking about in the way of, oh, I love him so much, I think he's the one, because we've all been there. We've all thought like the frog was the prince and it just ain't it. But you know when you know. And so I just really want to emphasize, I personally never wanted to live with somebody until we were like engaged or married because I was so terrified of how messy the breakup would be if you have to like sell your couch, and what if you split it, then who gets it, and breaking a lease. Like I just always thought of the headache of what it would be to I think I never believed that someone would want to be with me longer than a 12-month lease. I'm kidding, but kind of not. So I just want to emphasize that I don't recommend moving with your significant other until you know that you can both live your own independent lives to their fullest. I'm talking you being selfish with your time, you working out because it makes you feel good, you going to these types of restaurants, you doing these activities on the weekends. And once you live your independent life and realize that, okay, this person I'm dating, their independent life jives with mine, is the only time I would recommend, okay, I think you're ready to move in together, because I don't want you to lose that sense of identity, that sense of self just from proximity. And I think that can happen a lot when you move in with somebody you're in the most proximity with them because you share the same home. So therefore your most time is spent with them, etc. So I want to make sure that we're all having our own unique identities, our independent actions. And if they happen to coincide with the love of your life, that's incredible. And there's even more happiness to be found in that. It's a great time. I just don't want you guys to rush it. So those are my thoughts. I think as long as you are moving for you, you can't go wrong. And in terms of where you're going to live, apartments, all that logistics involved, I think everything is figure outable. And you don't know unless you try. So if you have an itch, like I said, I had an itch to move to New York. I never fully scratched it because I only traveled there. But hey, you know what I learned? If you love a city, but you don't want to live there full time, you can travel there frequently. You can earn enough money to save it to be able to afford those trips on a regular basis. So I just want to encourage you that where you live is so important. But there's a difference between the cities that you like and cities you appreciate and cities that feel like home. And like I said, the people that feel like home have so much to do with that. And one final note that I think was something that I recently thought of in this phase of my life. There's something to be said for squeezing as much incremental joy out of each stage and out of each move as you can. So what I mean by that is don't go from the studio apartment to the 2-story dream house that you built. Go from the studio apartment to the 1-bedroom, to the rental house, to the house you buy as a starter house, to the house you build to have children. And like, think about all those life upgrades and how excited and happy you're going to be in that moment. And I would just encourage you to not skip steps. And that goes the same for living with your partner. I've been with Andrew for 4 years now, and we are just now roomies. And every time he comes home and says, "Hey, roomie," I literally like melt. Like, it's so exciting. And 4 years, we still have something to giggle about, like kids. So I would just recommend with any move, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Everything is figure outable, and take the baby steps because you'll have a lot of fun along the way. So with all that being said, to Chloe, I just want to encourage you to take that leap to move to Arizona if that's where you feel like your heart is calling home right now. I know it can be scary, especially moving such a long distance, but especially with having family there already and a place that you feel comfortable to call home physically, I think if the city is calling to you, I would just encourage you to take that next step, because the incremental happiness that you can gain from a new experience is guaranteed, or at least a lesson learned, compared to staying the same. And I think there's definitely merit in planting roots, but I think you won't know where you want to plant your roots, whether it's Chicago or Arizona, until you try it and find out. So thank you again so much for this question. I hope I answered it. And again, guys, just want to encourage you to hit us up if there's anything else you want to hear. So yeah, I think that's a wrap. Thank you guys, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Monday through Sunday. If you're building a career, a business, or any relationships, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us.
With that in mind, we would be so grateful if you can spare 2 minutes to rate and review this podcast. Your reviews help spread the message to more people that work doesn't have to suck.
By the way, if you're looking for your community, join us on Instagram and TikTok at Monday through Sunday Pod. We're all about connecting our like-minded listeners together. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about by sending us a DM. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you again, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.